Suddenly, the bar door slammed as the Navy SEAL veteran stepped in, gray beard, sharp eyes, limp in one leg, and a chest full of stories buried behind a faded hoodie. Yet the bartender didn't see a hero walk in, just an old man with a military cap. So when the SEAL quietly ordered black coffee, the bar owner barked, "We don't serve freeloaders in here, out." And without warning, the owner slapped the coffee mug from his hands, shattering it on the counter, as everyone in the room froze. Some snickered, others fell silent. But what happened next made every person in that bar wish they had stepped in, because within seconds, the old vet straightened up, cracked his knuckles, and simply said, "You have no idea what you just did," then limped out without a fight, without a word of defense, leaving behind a stunned room and a quiet tension. But the next morning, at exactly 10:04 a.m., 3 black SUVs rolled up to the front of the bar, tires crunching over gravel like thunder. Doors swinging open in perfect coordination as 6 men in dark clothes, broad shoulders, tactical boots, and mirrored sunglasses stepped out like shadows from a forgotten war. One of them carried a flag, another had a duffel bag marked SEAL Team 4, and the one in front, a tall, intimidating figure with a silver star tattoo on his wrist, walked up to the door, looked through the glass, and said calmly, "Nobody disrespects our brother." And what unfolded inside that bar in the next 10 minutes shook the entire town to its core. But this isn't just about revenge. This is about who that veteran was, what he had survived, and why every second of this story matters, because if you think this is just some action tale, you're missing the lesson. Every citizen, every soldier, every father, every bar owner needs to hear before they judge someone too fast. So sit back and hear what really happened when a bar messed with a SEAL and got the whole damn team instead. Because if you've ever been disrespected, pushed aside, or misjudged, you'll want to hear how this old man fought back without lifting a finger but with the full weight of brotherhood behind him, and why you should never let anyone treat you like you don't matter, especially if they don't know the wars you fought in silence, because that bar owner had no idea that he had just thrown out a man who once led his unit through 3 covert ops in Fallujah, lost 5 men under his command, and lived every day with the names of the fallen tattooed on his back. And now, as the SEALs walk in, not with weapons, but with a mission, we go back 24 hours to the moment it all began, when Jack Hawk Malone stepped off the bus into his hometown after 12 years, wearing nothing but his dad's old jacket, a faded ball cap, and the memories of a life lived on the edge, trying to find a little peace in a town that had forgotten what respect looked like, and how a single act of arrogance set off a chain reaction that would expose cowardice, awaken courage, and change the town's heartbeat forever. As Hawk walked into that bar just hoping for a warm drink and a quiet place, unaware that his past was about to storm in behind him like a hurricane dressed in SEAL gear, loyalty, and justice, because when he took that slap of disrespect and walked away, he wasn't walking out alone. He was just walking toward the moment his brothers would come back for him, the moment this story truly begins, because when he took that slap of disrespect and walked away, he wasn't walking out alone. He was just walking toward the moment his brothers would come back for him, the moment this story truly begins. And as Hawk Malone stepped out into the chilly dusk of a town that had long stopped remembering the names of its protectors, he didn't look back at the bar, didn't curse, didn't scream. He simply reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an old scratched-up satellite phone, the kind you don't see in stores, punched in a code only 5 men on this earth knew, and held it to his ear as it rang once, twice, then connected with a voice that sounded like it had been carved out of battlefield smoke. "Talk to me, brother." And Hawk said 5 words that needed no explanation. "Time to bring the family." Then hung up, took a breath, and vanished down the alley, because the mission had already begun. And while the bartender mocked him, to some laughing regulars calling him a fraud, a drunk vet pretending to be someone he wasn't, across the state lines in a compound known only as Zone Echo, alarms blinked, doors opened, and 6 men who had buried brothers next to Hawk snapped into motion like war drums. Reed, the medic who once kept Hawk breathing with one lung in Syria. Bishop, the sniper with the 1,000-yard stare and a prayer on his wrist. Tank, the breacher whose body was covered in scars and loyalty. Marcus, the tech guy with hands that could shut down cities. Logan, the silent one who never smiled but would burn the world for his team, and leading them, Kane, older now, salt in his beard but eyes that still scanned every room like a battlefield. All of them dropped what they were doing, suited up, not in armor but in respect and memory and brotherhood, and within hours they were on the road, heading for a small town that didn't know what kind of storm was about to roll in. And back at the bar that morning, the owner was laughing with two deputies, bragging how he put that wannabe in his place, while the regulars joked about SEALs being just movie characters, none of them noticing the black SUVs parked outside like silent sentinels, none of them hearing the door open slowly and 6 figures step in one by one, each man carrying not anger but presence, a force that made the room fall silent like a bomb had just landed without sound. And the bar owner looked up, mid-sip of coffee, and choked when he saw Kane, who stepped forward and dropped a coin on the counter, a coin marked with a skull, trident, and wings, the unmistakable challenge coin of SEAL Team 4, the kind only given to those who'd walked through fire and back. And Kane said calmly, "You spilled coffee yesterday, we're here to clean it up," then waved toward the wall where a dusty American flag hung half-folded. "Fix that first before we fix you." And the bar owner stammered, unsure if this was real. But one look at the 6 faces, stone-carved, unreadable, told him he had made a mistake no PR team could erase, because this wasn't revenge, this was accountability, the kind that comes when you spit on someone who once dragged wounded children out of a war zone under fire, when you laugh at a man who once stopped a convoy ambush with only a knife in his fists, when you forget that the quietest man in the room might be the one who bled the most for your right to mock him. And Kane didn't yell, didn't punch, just slid a photo across the bar, a younger Hawk smiling, arms around his SEAL team, 2 of them now gone, names etched in the ink on his forearm, and beside the photo, a napkin with one line, "Still think he's a nobody?" And the room went still, the laughter died, and the bar owner's smirk faded as he realized this wasn't a joke. This was the kind of reckoning that doesn't come with court papers or lawsuits. It comes with the weight of earned respect, crashing down like an avalanche, and Kane nodded once. "We're buying the house a drink, in his name." And one by one the SEALs placed a drink on the counter, 6 different drinks, each with a story, each with a memory, and each meant to honor a man who had walked away with dignity instead of breaking the bar in half. And then Tank stepped up, leaned in close to the owner, and said without blinking, "You ever disrespect another vet in front of me, you won't have a bar left to sit in," then turned and walked out as calmly as he walked in, and no one moved, no one breathed, until the last boot hit the floor and the door shut behind them, and only then did people look at each other and realize they'd just seen something real, something ancient, honor, justice, loyalty. And as news of the visit spread through town, suddenly Hawk's name was whispered with guilt, with awe, and the mayor himself called for a meeting to publicly apologize. But Hawk didn't need apologies, he needed peace. And out by the lake on the edge of town, he stood quietly, hands in pockets, watching ducks scatter across the water, until Kane appeared beside him and said, "We handled it." And Hawk just nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Didn't ask you to." And Kane smiled faintly. "Didn't have to, because when one of them is disrespected, all of them bleed." And as the sun dipped low, casting shadows across the water, Kane added softly, "You know, this town ain't ready for us to stay, but it sure as hell ain't gonna forget we came." And Hawk chuckled, the first real smile in days. "Then let's give 'em something else to remember. Because the mission wasn't over. Not yet. Not until the town learned what respect really looks like. Not until every young man who saw that slap understood what silence can cost and what brotherhood can restore." And that night, at the community center, the SEALs showed up again, not with warnings, but with a projector and a slideshow, photos of their missions, stories of fallen friends, lessons on PTSD, transition, sacrifice, and every seat was full, people who had never served now listening, eyes wide, hearts heavy, realizing that behind every old veteran hat and limp gait is a mountain of history, courage, and pain. And when Hawk took the mic and told the story of the slap, not with bitterness but as a lesson. People stood to their feet, not to clap, but to apologize, and it wasn't a movie moment. It was real, messy, raw, and Kane ended the night by placing the folded flag from the bar, now fixed, at the center of the stage. "Respect is free," he said, "but forgetting its cost can be very expensive." And as the crowd filed out in silence, some wiping tears, others making calls to fathers they hadn't spoken to in years, the town began to shift, just slightly, like ice starting to melt, and Hawk walked out into the cool night air, not alone now, but with the echo of boots beside him. Because some battles don't need bullets. They just need brothers who never let you fight alone. Because some battles don't need bullets, they just need brothers who never let you fight alone. And as Hawk stepped out into that crisp night with the stars blinking down like silent sentries, something had shifted in the very bones of the town. As if the ground itself was ashamed it had let the boots of dishonor walk on it too long. And while most people filed out of the community center that night wiping their eyes and murmuring about what they'd just learned, a few stubborn hearts still beat with prideful ignorance, the kind that can't be taught by words, but only shocked, into humility. And one of them sat inside a dimly lit room across town. The same bar owner who'd thrown Hawk out, twirling an empty glass in his hand with a bitterness he couldn't name, because deep inside he knew what he did was wrong. But pride wouldn't let him admit it, not to his customers, not to his staff, not even to the mirror. And just as he poured himself another drink to drown the humiliation of being humbled by a room full of veterans, the door creaked open and in walked someone he never expected to see. Maggie, Hawk's sister, a nurse in the VA hospital 2 towns over, and she didn't knock, didn't wait to be greeted, just walked up to the bar, locked eyes with him, and said, "You don't know what my brothers carried just to keep standing." And before he could mutter some defensive excuse, she slapped a file down on the counter. Sealed military documents, hospital records, photos from Kandahar and Ramadi and Fallujah showing Hawk dragging wounded comrades, surviving a Humvee explosion, rebuilding orphanage walls with bare hands. And then Maggie pulled out a final photo. Hawk lying in a hospital bed, wired up, bandaged, and smiling despite a missing rib and cracked spine. And she whispered, "He never told anyone. He just kept walking, and you had the nerve to call him a fake." And for the first time since that day, the bar owner said nothing, because no words could crawl out of a man who just realized he hadn't slapped a fraud. He had slapped a ghost who had returned from hell to live quietly, and was spit on for choosing peace over applause. And Maggie didn't wait for him to speak, just walked out into the night, leaving behind a silence heavier than any guilt. And across town at the motel where the SEAL team had camped out, the mood was different. Not angry, not bitter, but focused as Kane gathered the team and laid out one last mission. Not for revenge, not for show, but to teach this town how to remember its forgotten heroes. And early next morning, before the sun even touched the rooftops, a rumble rolled through the town. Not of thunder, but of engines, trucks, and boots. And the SEALs, dressed in plain black with silver eagle pins, began what would become known as the Walk of Honor, marching from the Memorial Park to the bar, stopping at every veteran's home along the way, saluting, shaking hands, placing flags in gardens and wreaths on porches, waking a town from its apathy one house at a time. And as news spread on social media, locals poured out of their homes to watch, some in tears, some in confusion, but all in awe. And when they reached the bar, they stopped, formed a line, and stood silently for 5 full minutes, facing the door, honoring the moment the line was crossed, and the bar owner stepped out, face pale, hands trembling, and walked through them like a man walking through his own trial. And when he reached Hawk, who stood at the end wearing only his old faded SEAL ball cap and a jacket with his unit patch, the bar owner whispered, "I was wrong," and reached into his coat to hand over something no one expected, his deed to the bar. And he said, "It's yours now, run it right, run it with honor." And Hawk, stunned, refused to take it, saying, "I didn't come here to take your business. I came to remind people what matters." And Kane stepped forward and said, "Then we'll run it as a sanctuary, not a bar, a place where no vet is ever questioned again." And the crowd erupted into applause, Not the kind you hear at football games, but the raw, uneven kind that chokes up in throats and shakes in chests. And over the next few days, the place was transformed. Walls stripped of old beer ads and replaced with photos of veterans from every era, tables named after battles, a corner built just for homeless vets with free meals and resources, and the bar renamed the Trident, a symbol of sacrifice, strength, and the Sea Brothers who made it all happen. And people came from other towns just to sit at the bar and listen to stories, to leave thank you notes, to shake hands with ghosts who had come back not for war, but for healing. And every evening, Hawk sat by the window sipping coffee, greeting each person with a nod. Not because he needed attention, but because he wanted every person to feel what he was denied that first day: respect. And one night, as the stars lit up again, a teenage boy walked in nervous, holding his grandfather's dog tags, and said, "Sir, I think I want to serve, but I don't know if I'm strong enough." And Hawk leaned forward and said, "Strength ain't about what you carry, it's what you carry for others," and handed the boy his seal coin, the same one Kane had dropped on the bar days ago. "When you're ready, bring it back." And outside, Kane and the others stood by their trucks ready to leave, but knowing they'd never truly be gone, because their mission was complete. Not just defending the country, but defending the soul of a small town that had once forgotten them and would never again. And as the engines roared and the dust kicked up behind the SUVs disappearing into the horizon, the town stood still, hearts full, eyes watching, and behind them, the Trident glowed like a lighthouse. Not to ships, but to souls, marking the place where one man's quiet dignity rewrote the story of an entire community. And for anyone watching, wondering what they'd do if they were ever mocked, belittled, disrespected for their service or their pain, Hawk's story had the answer. Don't fight with fists, don't scream for sympathy, stand tall, remember who you are, and if you ever need backup, remember this: there are brothers out there who will always show up, not because you asked, but because that's what honor does. Because some legacies are built not in war zones but in quiet places where truth speaks louder than rage. And as the dust from the convoy of SEALs faded into the blue horizon, the town that once looked away now looked within, and Hawk stood alone by the window of the Trident, fingers lightly resting on a photo of his old unit, those who came back, those who didn't, and those who never really left the battlefield behind even when their boots hit civilian soil. And though the bar buzzed with new energy, with veterans sharing stories, young people volunteering, and families stopping by to simply say thank you, Hawk knew his mission here was reaching its final chapter, not because he was tired, but because he had lit the fire and it now burned in the hearts of others. And across the room, a new generation was stepping up, not with swagger, but with sincerity. A group of high school seniors creating a scholarship fund for children of veterans, a local carpenter building ramps and access rails for wounded soldiers, and even the mayor, once silent in his ignorance, now knee-deep in planning a citywide tribute honoring every forgotten vet buried without a headstone. And Hawk watched as the bar owner, no longer a man fueled by pride but by penance, mopped floors and handed out meals with no name badge and no credit taken, because some transformations aren't for show. They're the work of a man rebuilding himself one humble act at a time. And just as Hawk reached for his jacket to head out for a walk, he was stopped by a knock at the door, slow, deliberate, heavy with purpose. And when he opened it, there stood an old man, cane in hand, navy cap on his head, eyes shining behind thick lenses, and he simply said, "Son, I watched what you did here. I've been hiding for 50 years, afraid to admit I served, afraid no one would believe me. But because of you, I wore this hat again." And Hawk didn't say a word, just stepped forward and embraced the stranger, because some salutes aren't with hands but with hearts. And in that moment, another wall inside someone crumbled, another wound began to close. And for the next few days, the Trident became something the country hadn't seen in a long time. A living, breathing monument where people didn't just remember service, they honored it through action. And it was during one of those nights, cool air, stars blinking down, laughter and memories echoing through the bar, that Kane returned, this time alone. in civilian clothes with a backpack and a quiet look in his eyes, and when Hawk saw him, they didn't speak at first, just nodded. Brothers who needed no words. And finally Kane sat at the counter, pulled out a file and said, "I've been authorized to start a national pilot. Places like this in every state, but it starts with you." And Hawk blinked, unsure. "Me?" And Kane nodded. "Yeah, because you didn't just flip a town, you reminded a nation." And over the next few weeks, blueprints were drawn, veterans from other states visited, and media crews tried to get interviews only to be turned away by Hawk's soft smile and simple reply. "This ain't about cameras, it's about people." And the Trident's message spread anyway. Not as viral content, but as word-of-mouth legacy, from firehouses to classrooms, from barbershops to church pews, and letters began arriving. Handwritten, folded, tear-stained, from Vietnam vets, Iraq survivors, Gold Star mothers, even from kids who wrote, "I want to be brave like Hawk when I grow up." And yet, through all the noise, Hawk stayed steady. No titles, no medals, just the man behind the counter pouring coffee. For the broken, listening without judgment, guiding without ego. And then came the day he knew would arrive, the day he'd have to leave. Not because he was finished, but because others were ready to carry it on. And with his bag packed, boots laced, coin in pocket, and a note left behind that read simply, "Don't serve the drinks, serve the dignity," Hawk walked into the sunrise, disappearing down that same dusty road the SEAL convoy had taken. But now, every step behind him was followed by 1,000 more, by people no longer silent, no longer blind, and though the Trident stood still, its spirit moved with him into every town where respect was overdue, into every home where a folded flag sat on a mantle collecting dust, into every conversation where someone dared to say, "They don't look like a real vet," only to be corrected by a community now educated, awakened, and unapologetically proud. And for the audience hearing this now, wondering, what do I do if someone disrespects me like they did Hawk? You don't need a SEAL team. You don't need cameras. You don't even need to fight back. You just need to remember who you are. Remember your brothers, your sacrifices, and then stand your ground not with anger, but with legacy. Speak through your actions. Lead with quiet dignity, and never let anyone rewrite your story, because the world may forget headlines, but it never forgets the man who stood for something greater than himself. And as Hawk's story echoes beyond this video, let it remind you that honor doesn't always come with applause. It often walks in silence, changes hearts in whispers, and leaves behind a light so strong it guides strangers home. And that is how one man, kicked out of a bar, rebuilt a nation's respect, one soul at a time.